If you had stood inside Old Trafford on May 26, 1999, you would have heard 70,000 people screaming at a television screen in Barcelona. Manchester United were losing the Champions League final. The trophy was being fitted with Bayern Munich ribbons. UEFA officials rehearsed congratulations in German. Then, in 2 minutes, the universe cracked open. Sheringham equalized. Solskjaer scored the winner. Club from an industrial city completed something never done before. The Treble, the Premier League, the FA Cup, the Champions League, all in a single season. The streets of Manchester flooded with red. Nobody dancing on Dean's Gate that night paid attention to the thing that actually mattered. Manchester United in 1999 was not operating primarily as a football club. It was a clean balance sheet, listed on the London Stock Exchange, generating over £100 million a year in revenue, rising fast. A global fan base in the tens of millions. The club carried zero debt. It's not low debt. Zero, every pound earned, flowed back into the institution. There was no external creditor, no interest payment, no obligation sitting between revenue and operations. Revenue was behaviorally locked in, not market-driven. Supporter born in Salford buys tickets, shirts, and subscriptions for life. The cash flow was not just large, it was predictable. Arrived every week, every season, every year, regardless of results. Guaranteed recurring revenue, zero leverage, total financial independence. In leveraged finance, that is not safety. It is capacity, unused borrowing capacity. It tells the market this institution can absorb enormous leverage and still service the payments, because the revenue is reliable enough to cover whatever you load onto it. An asset with no encumbrance. The asset did not need to change. Only the capital structure needed to change. Over the next 2 decades, a single financial mechanism would redirect a staggering volume of cash out of this institution. Not through mismanagement, not through bad luck, through structure. The walls would remain standing. Flags would keep flying. The treasury would be methodically emptied by a machine never built to serve the institution. To understand what happened to Manchester United, stop watching the pitch. A leveraged buyout follows a recognizable pattern. The model begins with an asset that cannot easily stop generating cash, something that keeps producing income regardless of who owns it. You acquire it primarily with borrowed money, a small amount of equity. The rest financed through bank loans, bonds, and structured debt. Then comes the structural shift. In a normal transaction, the buyer services the debt from their own resources. In a leveraged buyout, the buyer transfers the obligation to the asset itself. The acquired entity becomes responsible for servicing the debt incurred to acquire it. The buyer walks away with control and a small equity outlay. The target wakes up carrying debt it never agreed to, never benefited from, and must now service before it can spend a single pound on its actual purpose. Revenue that once funded the institution now services the acquisition debt. Everything else is residual. Lenders agree because of one thing: predictable cash flow. The customers will keep paying. The television money will keep arriving. The sponsorship contracts are locked in. The revenue is the collateral. The loyalty of the fan base is the security against which the entire debt structure is written. A football club stops looking like a sporting institution. It starts looking like a debt-servicing vehicle with a pitch attached. This is not about football. This is about leverage. Malcolm Glazer did not invent the leveraged buyout. He recognized that no one had yet applied it to a football institution of this scale. Glazer was a businessman from Rochester, New York. He emerged from a background defined by small asset acquisition and financial restructuring. He spent his career acquiring undervalued assets and restructuring them financially to extract returns. He was not operating as a football stakeholder. He did not understand the offside rule, could not name a single player in the treble-winning squad. He understood something more operationally relevant. Manchester United's capital structure contained enormous unused debt capacity. Zero leverage on a revenue base of that size meant the institution could absorb hundreds of millions in borrowing and still meet the payments. The revenue was reliable. The fan base was captive. The broadcast contracts were long-term. He did not see a football club. He was looking at an unleveraged balance sheet attached to a securitizable revenue stream. Beginning in 2003, Glazer accumulated shares steadily until control became inevitable. By late 2004, he held nearly a third of the stock. In May 2005, after key institutional shareholders sold, Glazer crossed the compulsory acquisition threshold. The club was delisted. Public ownership ended. Fans had no voice in the transaction. Acquisition cost: approximately £790 million. Glazer's equity contribution was a fraction. The majority was borrowed, bank loans, secured bonds. And at the bottom of the stack, PIK notes, payment in kind. Interest between 14 and 16%, 3 to 4 times the market rate. No current cash payments required. The interest compounded automatically, added itself to the principal. The debt grew in the absence of any action. Time itself was a cost. Then the structural act that defined everything. The entire debt package was transferred onto the balance sheet of Manchester United Football Club, debt-free on a Friday. Over £500 million in obligations by Monday, not debt incurred to buy players, not debt incurred to expand the stadium, not debt incurred to benefit the institution at all. Debt incurred by an external family to purchase the institution, now converted into a liability the institution would service from its own revenues for 2 decades. The buyer's acquisition cost became the target's operating burden. Revenue that funded football now funded debt first. The institution worked for its debt before it worked for itself. Revenue remained. Ownership changed. Obligations multiplied. Revenue did not decline. It grew. Broadcasting deals expanded. Sponsorship income multiplied. The commercial operation extended globally. By the mid-2010s, hundreds of millions per year. Operational performance was not the controlling variable. Financing costs sat first in line for revenue. Player wages, transfer budgets, stadium maintenance, academy investment received what remained. Debt service sat at the top of the cash flow waterfall. Tens of millions per year, every year, redirected from operations to capital markets. Bondholders, hedge funds, investment banks in London and New York. They held paper. The paper entitled them to cash. The cash arrived on schedule. Over 2 decades, close to £1 billion was transferred out of the operating entity, a capital that no longer existed there. Then the second extraction layer. Having loaded the institution with debt, the Glazers began paying themselves dividends from remaining cash flow. 2 masters now. Debt first, family second. Football got the residual. The physical consequences became visible. Old Trafford deteriorated. The roof leaked. Corporate facilities aged. Capacity remained frozen. Corners of the ground sat undeveloped. Repairs would later be measured in the billions. Capital that did not exist because it had already been extracted. Performance masked leverage, till it couldn't. Ferguson retired in 2013. The gap became visible. Successive managerial resets consumed cash without solving the underlying problem. Players signed on wages reflecting negotiating weaknesses, not strategy. Vast sums spent on transfers, nothing won. No league title since 2013, no Champions League. The money was consumed by a structure hollowed out from the inside. The cycle reinforced itself. Decline reduced the ability to attract talent, which produced further decline, which created pressure to overspend, which consumed capital, which left less for infrastructure. Each turn reinforced the last. This is not about football. This is about leverage. The fans understood before the analysts did. Green and gold scarves, since 2005. The colors of Newton Heath. In that year, thousands walked away and founded FC United of Manchester, a fan-owned club, 9th tier of English football. In 2021, supporters breached the stadium, entered the pitch. Liverpool match postponed. The most significant act of fan resistance in modern English football. The Glazers did not leave. The extraction engine was still running, revenue still flowing, debt still serviced, dividends still paid, fans still buying tickets, shirts, subscriptions. Because the institution is not a product, it is an identity. You do not cancel your identity. The cash continues to flow. The mechanism continues to extract. The story of Manchester United is a case study. Financial mechanism applied to an institution whose characteristics made it uniquely vulnerable. You acquire an asset with borrowed money. You transfer the debt to the asset. You service the debt from the asset's cash flow. You extract returns from whatever remains. One precondition: the revenue must be reliable. If the customers can leave, the model collapses. If they stay, it runs indefinitely. The damage appeared incrementally, each shortfall small enough to ignore, but they compound. The gap between what the institution earns and what it retains widens. After 2 decades, that gap is a chasm. Old Trafford still stands. The floodlights still burn. The turnstiles still click. From a distance, it appears intact. But the ledger tells a different story. An institution once reinvesting in its future now services external obligations first. The cash flow was redirected. Consequences accumulated for 20 years, slowly eroding its foundation. Loyalty can be modeled. Tradition can be securitized. Devotion can be written into covenants. The revenue will hold. The mechanism will function cold and unyielding. But you cannot extract operating capital for 2 decades and expect to compete. The arithmetic does not allow a different outcome. Every pound removed was a pound not reinvested, a deficit compounded. The leveraged buyout did not end the institution. It repurposed it. The evidence is not in the trophy cabinet, not on the pitch, nor in the manager's office. The evidence appears as deferred maintenance, capital shortfall, and infrastructure decay.